Hey guys, so as you can pretty clearly see behind me, my tank is in desperate need of a water change right now. It's looking terrible. So what I'm going to do today is show you guys, going back to the basics, how to do a really nitpicky water change. That is to say, how to do a water change that minimizes the need for the fish and plants to go through any sort of transition at all, except for just the dilution of their system, basically. So we're going to add the same pH water, the same temperature water. We're going to degas the water. That's a big thing. That's probably the only thing, actually. The degassing part is the only part that if you are an intermediate or even beginner aquarist, you're probably not familiar with. Anyway guys, let's get started. Oh, and actually one more thing before I jump into this. If you have a really large tank, like say 180 gallon plus or something, you're probably not going to be running buckets. You're probably just going to be taking like a hose directly into your tank kind of thing. And you're probably going to condition it inside the tank, and that's fine. You know, those people have to do what they have to do. This is more for people with smaller sized tanks who can control their system. Also, one other thing, I'm going to be talking about the actual time it takes for sodium thiosulfate, the active ingredient, in your water conditioner to take effect, and I'll cite sources below. So the first thing you're going to notice about my method, and this is the point of it, is that it's very, very slow. But we're trying to acclimate the fish here in a way that, you know, if you have really sensitive fish, it doesn't disturb them. Okay, so the very first thing I do when I get started is get all 4 of my buckets filled up with water. I've got a 55 gallon tank. I'm going to do like a 40%-ish water change. So I'm going to need probably more than this, but for now, just 4 buckets of water. The first bucket of water, I have 2 lines going into it. I've got the heater here, and I've got an air line. Right? So 2 things that need electricity, the air pump and then the heater, which I haven't plugged in yet because I'm first adjusting it to the cold temperature of the water. Then I'm going to turn it on so that the glass in the heater doesn't shatter. So back over here, plugging in the heater, and I'm just going to let this guy sit here like this. The next step. Alright, so since I use sodium thiosulfate crystals, here is how I prep my water conditioner. I already did my math, so I know that I need about 300 milligrams-ish water conditioner per 5 gallons. Of course, sodium thiosulfate is non-toxic, so this is okay to touch it with my hands. I'm not worried about contaminating the bottle either. So this step takes the longest, so I want to get it going right away, or the second longest I should say. So I want to get the water conditioned right away. It takes about 30 minutes minimum for all your chloramine or chloramines to be conditioned from your water. I will cite the sources below. Okay, so this next step I'm not going to make you guys sit through because I don't have a digital pH meter. All I have is this crappy thing. But what I'm going to do now is test my tank water and match it up and make sure that it's the exact same as my my adjusted tap water. And I'm going to be using vinegar to adjust my pH. My tap water is like 8 point something. I'm going to be lowering it down to 6.8. Vinegar is an alternative to this. This is pH decrease. This uses sulfuric acid. This uses carboxylic acid. This one, it's byproduct when it's metabolized by microbes in the aquarium. Basically, essentially what we're doing with this, we're just like adding protons to the system, because that's what lowering the pH means. It means there are more available protons that the water is willing to shed off, as opposed to the opposite. If the pH is really high, that means that all of your water molecules are going to be trying to pull protons in because they're going to be in their OH form as opposed to their H3O form. But in any case, either acid lowers the pH, but one of them has byproducts that are safer for your aquarium. The other one has byproducts that aren't unsafe for your aquarium. Sulfuric acid is perfectly fine. The byproducts that it generates are okay. It's just that the more sulfate groups you add to your water, the more fuel you're going to have for bacteria that can turn that sulfate into H2S gas, which is toxic and smelly. So that is why I choose to use vinegar as opposed to this. Also, because vinegar can be metabolized into CO2, which my plants can use. So, that's a little bit of my logic behind my choice in products that lower pH. All of that said, I'm chemically lowering my pH, and that is not always, ideal. If I were a little bit better of an aquarist, I would probably use peat moss or something to naturally, slowly adjust my pH of my tap water and do it all in like some giant trash can or something rather than 5-gallon buckets. But because I don't really have the space for something like that, this is my option, and I'm sure a lot of you guys would agree that if you needed to bring your pH down, sometimes easier, despite this video being about the long way, sometimes easier is, acceptable as well. Okay, one little trick before I move on to the next step. If you take one of these little glass test tubes here that you use for your little test kits and whatnot, put a piece of tape around it, get a bunch of these like tiny 1-penny pipettes from eBay or Amazon. You can tape those to the sides of your bottles, put the pipette in like that, and makes life a lot easier. Okay, so this container right here is filled with tap water, and as you can see, there are tiny little bubbles that are starting to form on the side of the acrylic. And what that can do to a fish is cause what is called gas bubble disease, and it is due to the supersaturation of gases inside our tap water. All tap water is supersaturated with gas, and the reason being so that there is a higher pressure of water inside the pipes than there is outside, so that outside groundwater can't contaminate our drinking water. And this here is the solution for that gas bubble disease problem. By running an air line into your water before you add it to your tank, you eliminate the risk of your fish developing gas bubble disease. Whether it's acute or chronic, you're eliminating the risk. And how it works is you're just forcing air through the water, and it just takes that quantity of air that is more than the solution can hold and forces it out by just like blowing through it, essentially. So here's one of the last preparation steps. I'm going to take a scoop of water just for our convenience for this video. I'm going to use this scoop of water to dose all of my planted tank nutrients into. Okay, so here is the last step in the preparation of the water, at least. So here's our a sample of the water we're going to be adding to the tank. I'm going to add this back to the bucket before we add it to the tank, and it will actually be in the last bucket of water that we add. So this is our last bucket, and here is the concoction we just prepared. Just gonna rinse that out. Cool. Okay, so the next part is pretty standard. I'm not going to make you sit through it. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to empty the water down about halfway. I'm going to clean out my canister filter. I'm going to clean out the sponges in my hang-on back filter. And scrub algae, remove some snails. But I'll show you guys what I do when I add water again after all that is done.